Varsovia, Sofía, Zagreb, Bucarest, La Haya,
Yeah,
Estocolmo,
Zagreb,
Vilna,
Bucharest,
y
The
hoy
Hague,
Madrid.
Stockholm,
Muy buenas
Vilnius, and
tardes y
today Madrid.
bienvenidos a la octava
Welcome
parada de
to the
esta
eighth
gira
stop of
del
this
Futuro
tour,
de
The
Europa,
Future
una
of
iniciativa del
Europe,
Grupo
an
de los
initiative
Conservadores y
launched by the
Reformistas
European
Europeos, el
Conservatives and
ECR Group, que tiene
Reformists,
como objetivo analizar el
the
futuro del
ERC
viejo
Group, which
continente en
aims
un
to create
panorama
forums
sometido
for
a
discussion
constantes cambios
and debate the
y cada
future
vez, por qué no
of
decirlo,
the old
haciendo
continent
frente a más
in
amenazas
an
y
increasingly
desafíos.
changing
Este evento se está retransmitiendo
sphere,
de forma
facing more and
simultánea en
more
los canales de
challenges.
YouTube del
This
Grupo
event
ECR,
is being
también de Vox
broadcasted
y de Vox
on
Europa,
the
y pueden
ERC
seguirlo en
Group
5
and
idiomas por
Vox
primera
Europe
vez en esta
channels
gira,
on
también
YouTube,
en
and you
francés.
can follow
Y
it
además de
in 5
seguirlo,
languages,
pueden
in
participar,
this occasion
porque
also
estamos
in
deseando
French. And
recibir
of
sus
course,
comentarios,
you can
preguntas,
participate
reflexiones
because we are looking
sobre
forward
esta
to
cuestión, sobre
receiving
el
your
futuro de
questions,
Europa. ¿Y cómo
comments
pueden
about
hacerlo?
the
Pues en
subject
las
matter,
redes
the
sociales,
future
a
of
través
Europe.
de Twitter,
How can you do
con el
it? On
hashtag
social media,
AskResetEU
through
o en
Twitter
los
with the
chats de
hashtag
cada uno de los
AskResetEU,
canales.
or
Tenemos
using
por
the
delante
chats on
una
the
hora y
different
media de
channels. We have
interesantísimo
an hour
debate
and a half
que
ahead
vamos a
of us,
inaugurar yéndonos hasta
facing
Polonia.
very interesting
Allí nos
discussion,
escucha ya el
and
profesor
this
Legutko,
discussion will take us
copresidente del
to
Grupo
Poland, where
ECR en el Parlamento
Professor
Europeo,
Legutko,
que nos da la
chairman
bienvenida.
of
Muy buenas tardes,
the ERC
profesor.
group in the European Parliament, is already listening to us, and he's going to welcome
Good
us.
afternoon, Madrid. Good afternoon and welcome to the eighth stop of the ECI Europe's Future Tour. This Madrid event is an important milestone for our initiative to set out our alternative vision for the future of Europe. It marks 6 months since we launched our campaign in Warsaw. Since then, we have seen the positive reaction of ordinary citizens to our vision. From Warsaw to Sofia and from Bucharest to The Hague, politicians, experts and civil society have come together to discuss a different future, a better future for our European community. Our plan was to rally all citizens and their political parties to our vision of Europe as a place where independent nations can work and cooperate together to decide their own fate. We wanted to end the self-proclaimed monopoly of the federalists in Europe to have the only constructive vision for the future of our Union. We wanted to offer a positive alternative and to start a movement across the continent, a movement that protects our traditions, culture and way of life. It is important to remember that ECR vision is not just an idea. It comes from our past, because our Europe was, and for now still is, home to a unique heritage. Europe is to be the place where nations nurture and protect their cultures and traditions, a place where freedom, sovereignty and independence are defended, a place where individuals, families and communities thrive. Indeed, these shared values gave us the strength to overcome totalitarian regimes and foreign oppression. These values gave birth to our thriving national democracies. And based on those values, the founder-fathers of what is now the European Union created a community of sovereign states working in close and friendly cooperation. But this noble idea is being corrupted by over-centralization. It is being betrayed by those who oppose our national democracies and who see the future of Europe as a centralized, bureaucratic, monolithic union that seeks to impose its will on all the peoples and nations of our continent. That is why this ECI Europe's Future Tour comes at a most important moment. A moment where the peoples of the nations of Europe need to be aware of the impending danger and raise their voices to defend their national identities and national democracies. The federalist forces in Brussels seek to present all of us who believe in our national democracies and who also want them to cooperate closely together as a community of nations with a political ultimatum. They tell us that there is only one choice: more Europe or no Europe. They say we must choose between a centralized super-state on the one hand and international anarchy on the other. But there is a middle way, the easier way. It is a path based on common sense and Euro-realism. It is time to restore the ideal of a Europe that respects the sovereignty of our national democracies, a Europe run by our member states and not by a Brussels elite. It is time to rebuild our community of European states, a community of mutual respect, cooperation and solidarity. It is time for a new hope for Europe.
Thank you very much, Professor Legutko. And from Brussels, we're traveling, from Poland, we're traveling to Brussels, from where we will hear the other co-president of the ECR group at the Parliament, Raffaele Fitto. Good afternoon, Mr. Fitto.
Buonasera a tutti e benvenuti all'8ª tappa del
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the 8th stage of this ECR tour, the Future of Europe, tonight in Madrid. This is why I'd like to thank first President Santiago Abascal, my colleague Bouchardel, and the whole Vox delegation for organizing the event and for the hard work that they do every day in Brussels to defend the values and identities that are the basis of our continent's thousands years history. A series of meetings started 6 months ago in Warsaw with the aim of promoting a debate on the future perspectives of Europe. The Conference on the Future of Europe today is developed why today they have started the works on the future of Europe, a conference over which our group has expressed its concerns about the real objectives and the way it has been structured. Yet another attempt to pursue a federalist and centralizing agenda imposed and not the result of a real discussion from below with the aim of creating a European super-state. Hence the need to represent an alternative vision to those who are asking from us today a more Europe, a greater Europe, but also to those who are asking us to destroy it, a vision based on a reform of the treaties but in full respect of the principles of proportionality, subsidiarity and competence, and of the defense of the autonomy and sovereignty of member states. A Europe that is able to give a real and serious perspective of growth, prosperity and security for the future. This requires a rethinking of what the EU has been until now. We need to rediscover the spirit of the founding fathers, a Europe of the homelands, of the nations, of a community of free and sovereign states that, united in diversity, will bring back to the center of the political debate the defense of fundamental values and traditions such as the Christian roots and the defense of the family, the national identity, and that will share and successfully face the challenges of the present and the future. These are issues that will be subject of our discussions today and on which I am convinced, as in previous events, valuable ideas and contributions will be forthcoming to continue along our path. Thanking my colleagues again and all panelists who will be participating, all friends from Vox, and I hope you will continue with your work. Well, this is the beginning of this afternoon of discussion, structured around 3 different panels that will have the best experts on the different subject matters, live interviews, remote interviews, and several videos. On what aspects? Well, aspects that are key to the old continent: immigration, gender ideology, agriculture, and the Green Deal, and of course the role of Iberosphere in Europe, and of course the future of Europe. This last panel will have the presence of Santiago Abascal, President of Vox, and Mariana Maréchal, MP of the National Assembly of France. And as you can see, it's a thrilling discussion that we have ahead of us. But as we said, this is the 8th stop of a tour that has been going through Europe for many months. And this is why we can already draw some conclusions. And this is something that takes us again to Poland. Here we have Professor Krasnodebski. He is president of the ECR group that analyzes the future of Europe. Good afternoon, Doctor, and thank you very much for being with us here in Madrid virtually.
Dobry wieczór, witam serdecznie.
Good afternoon, everyone. We are talking here about the way that the European Union needs to follow in order to be one of the nations that the ECR will want to work with.
Ja przede wszystkim chciałbym przede wszystkim wyrazić swoją radość, że nasza trasa doprowadziła do Madrytu, bo czymś jest Europa bez Hiszpanii, bez jej historii, bez jej kultury. Jak wiadomo, poprzednio byliśmy obecni w Wilnie, jakby po drugiej stronie Unii Europejskiej, na innej granicy. Tam mówiliśmy bardzo dużo o wartościach chrześcijańskich, mówiliśmy też o rozwoju gospodarczym. Dzisiaj będziemy kontynuować ten temat. Jakie są perspektywy? No, my mówimy wszędzie, za każdym razem, tak jak teraz, a przedtem w Wilnie, przedtem jeszcze w Sztokholmie, na wszystkich przystankach naszej trasy. Mówimy o innej wizji Europy, o Europie, która jest Europą wolnych narodów i nie jest owładnięta nienawiścią do samych siebie, ojkofobią, nienawiścią do własnej kultury, do własnego kraju i również do Europy i jej dziedzictwa, tego wspólnego dziedzictwa, które nas łączy. Pani pyta, co należy robić, jak należy postępować. Nasza wizja, która nie jest niestety dominująca, jeżeli chodzi o poziom unijny, jeżeli chodzi o dyskusję unijną, żeby ona rzeczywiście stała się taką wizją dominującą. Otóż musimy się zwrócić do obywateli, musimy przełamać pewien monopol informacyjny. To jest ciągle tak, że jeżeli my w Polsce chcemy się dowiedzieć o Hiszpanii, to sięgamy do tych mediów głównego nurtu, które prezentują właśnie i bronią innej zupełnie wizji Europy, które myślę, że podobnie jest zresztą w przypadku odwrotnym, kiedy Hiszpanie chcą się dowiedzieć o tym, co się dzieje w Polsce, kiedy chcą się dowiedzieć o tym, co się dzieje na Litwie, na Węgrzech, czy w innym kraju.
Lithuania, Hungary, or other countries, well, I think at the end of the day, we're always in the hands of intermediaries, proxies, which perhaps they form the image of reality, which do not share our values and our vision. And I think that this initiative, this way forward that has taken us through Europe and thus must lead us to reset the Union is a very important step. It's an attempt to challenge the monopoly, to do away with it. So I think that the better we communicate amongst us, the better Polish and Spaniards know each other, Swedish know each other, Lithuanians know each other, and with other people that share our same values, it'll be easier to confirm a real Europe with real values. This media which actually tell the truth are rarely found here in Spain, at least. So I hope that we have at least managed to draw some conclusions based on the journey of this forum. So what are your conclusions on the future of Europe, and what do you think should be the next steps?
Ja też zachęcam wszystkich, żeby obejrzeli jeszcze raz zapis tych naszych debat.
I am actually encouraging everyone to go back to the recordings of the different discussions that we've had. They're available on the internet. For now, we have learned a lot about differences and about the fact that we have a common perspective. We stand for sovereignty, we stand for a shared vision, and we have discussed our problems, which are sometimes slightly different, but we have the same priorities. In Sweden, for instance, I learned about how important it is for our Swedish colleagues to focus on fighting organized crime. At Sofia, I learned about how important it is for our Bulgarian friends to defend the external borders of the European Union. At Vilnius, I learned about how important economic development is for Lithuanians, and I also learned about how close they are to Christian values. So I know that you're going to be talking about a problem that concerns us all today, and which will indeed be presented as a relevant problem for Spain, which is gender ideology, which is increasingly more and more aggressive and which we shall not accept. And here we have the issue of our identity and our values. So I think that all these stops have allowed us to learn something about the differences and the common interests that we all have, which is something that makes Europe something completely exceptional and beautiful. Beautiful in its diversity and in its shared friendship. As our president says, colleagues Legutko and Fito, we want to stand for this diversity and for this heritage because we think that this is our common wealth, and we also want to support the collaboration between nations based on mutual respect and on a deep knowledge of one another. Thank you very much. Thank you so very much. It's actually an honor to have you here with us in this forum. And now we're going to start with the discussion. In a few seconds on this stage, we'll have the head of the Vox delegation at the European Parliament, Jorge Buxade, who will be facilitating and leading these three discussion panels. So in a few seconds, we will have this stage full of guests. In the meanwhile, you're going to watch a very interesting video on gender ideology with Margarita de la Pisa, member of Vox, representative at the European Parliament, and a member of the ECR. It's easy to become aware of things that impact us directly, such as, for instance, the pandemic, but it's difficult to see how the slow progress of ideology impacts our minds. As human beings, we adapt to almost any circumstance, and it's difficult for us to identify evil at first glance. Gender ideology is an ideological blur that makes it difficult for us to see what's in front of us. To, for instance, not distinguish between men and women, because it seems that everything is construct and that it tries to convey that genders are changes in self-perception. So this causes a fear in us, and it's a massive type of visor that actually challenges the legacy and the naturality. And we need to focus on dignity, and we can discover dignity if we discover who we are and our features. These singular differences that make us unique. Our differences make us up as a society. Complementarity between men and women is a source of wealth. And indeed, gender ideology sees these differences as a systematic injustice that differentiates us all. And these differences, according to them, can only be solved through the intervention of the state that will regulate them with an intervention. This responds to an attempt which is impossible. It's an identity that throws to a spiritual void. But if we were to accept our nature and the reality of things, we wouldn't need to build it. We wouldn't need to make it up. And this ideology, which is in different entities at the European level, and everything that women do is a burden, and it leads us to renounce to our natural longings. So we must refer to the values and principles that were the core of the European project. Family, women, and the right to life must play the essential role that all societies require to get to maturity and fullness. If we realize our own being, we will see how confidence and trust feed our hearts and endow our lives with sense and the future of Europe.
Good
afternoon, and welcome to this first panel of the Conference on the Future of Europe, organized by the ECR Group. Agenda 2030. I'm sure you have heard about it, and if you haven't heard about it, you've probably seen nonetheless the colorful circle that some people place on their label, which is a progressive symbology, but we don't know who or what is behind this multicolored circle. But we do know because common sense that dictates, we know that it's not fully good. And this is about an ideology that it tries to force upon us in media, movie, schools, advertising, Netflix, everywhere. And it's basically summarized in a good dose of political correctness, censorship, immigrationism, climatism, gender ideology, and worship of the goddess equality. In this first part of the panel, we are going to have with us Carla Toscano, a national congresswoman representing Vox, and who is the scourge of the communist minister, Irene Montero. Thank you very much, Carla, and welcome. Thank you, Jorge. It's a pleasure to be here. We also have a guest joining us remotely, Angel Dambatsky, member of the European Parliament of the Bulgarian National Movement, and also scourge against political correctness in the European Parliament. Good afternoon, Angel.
Good afternoon, Jorge. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. It's an honor for me to be with you today.
Thank you. Margarita de la Pisa mentioned in the video that introduced this first panel on gender ideology that gender ideology denies the spiritual and transcendent dimension of human beings and leads them to an existential void. This calls for a very first question, which is how are we going to fill that void? But the first thing that I would like to ask you both is how has this ideology made it so far? Because at first glance, it seems completely ridiculous. This very same week, media said that in the next Olympic Games, in the women's weightlifting tournament, they will have a man participating. If they were to tell us this 10 years ago, we would think that it's complete madness and that would be impossible to happen. But this is what's going on here. So, Carla, what do we say about this?
I would like to start by saying that we're living a moment in time that we've never seen before. Actually, what happens is that evil is considered to be something good, and what good things are considered to be evil. This has never happened in history before. Evil has always existed, and we knew what evil was. However, they are making us believe that what is correct is incorrect, and what's incorrect is correct. How can they achieve this? How can they turn things around? Can they turn things, the values of a full civilization being turned around? And this has been achieved through different strategies like legislation such as LGBTI legislation, euthanasia legislation, laws that are progressing in Europe. They are imposing these laws with language. Language is being used with concepts that sounds very beautiful, such as liberty and equality, but they hide tyrannic concepts, and they are teaching us with constant propaganda in all of the spheres of our life. And this is happening very often with children. And they are teaching them constantly another strategy is victimization. They have come up with groups that have nothing to do with one another, and they tell this group that they are victims, that they have been oppressed through their entire lives. And another strategy is coming up with new rights, inventing rights. These globalist powers set a path, they set a purpose, and they say that this is a fundamental right. And when saying that this is a fundamental right, they pretend to give something to society. And with this, those who are against it are considered to be evil. They criminalize you, they can make you illegal because you are opposing a fundamental right. And that's the strategy that they are using and the way to implement this gender ideology. Angel, how have we gotten that far based on your experience at Brussels?
Thank you once again, Jorge. It's really an honor for me to be part of your Box Conference, exceptional conference right now. But I have to say, you are absolutely right. We are in the middle of a cultural war, a war against degeneracy, a war with people who want us to believe that it is normal to sexualize children and to believe that biological gender is a choice rather than a fact. I used to call these people very often liberal Bolsheviks and communists, and they became very, very angry. They became crazy because this is a fact. They use the same tactics as the Bolshevik, the original ones. They use suppression of any different opinion. They use attacks against people holding very traditional views. They want to silence normality, Jorge. In addition, I have to tell you they are very relentless in their tactics. For example, in European Parliament, we see this every session. It does not matter whether a given report is about fishing in the North Sea, for the situation in Ethiopia or digital single market. You will always find amendments which have the unique aim of introducing gender ideology, and this is a fact, sad but true. Back to you, Jorge.
Gracias, Ángel.
Thank you so much, Angel. Margarita was asking herself on the video about gender ideology and how it is producing a spiritual void. And the problem is how to fill in this spiritual void, because we need to be fulfilled. In my opinion, it's very clear. It's by consuming. This is an image that we've seen in Hollywood movies of the depressed and sad man who's eating ice cream. And this is not something that script writers have come up with, but it responds to a reality. We're seeing how large multinational corporations are the main ones propagating this gender ideology. Carla, do you think that this spiritual void is intended, or we're living in this time and we have to assume it? I think they're looking for this. Jorge Chesterton used to say that when man loses faith in God, it loses common sense as well. And that's the essence of what has happened, actually. I believe that some supranational entities have pushed men to replace the values that we have nowadays in our Judeo-Christian traditions, such as family, the dignity of human beings, the defense of life, sacrifice, efforts. These type of supranational entities are interested in the destruction of human nature, to be able to control us and to remain in power. And they've been able to replace those values by values, so to call them like that, which are totally different, and they are promoted by gender ideology, which is not having respect for life, sexual promiscuity, the confusion of sexual orientation, the promotion of sexual options that can be respected but that do not lead to the creation of life. And these supranational entities are promoting these type of values to replace them by these other ones that I was mentioning earlier, because at the end of the day, the idea is for human beings to believe that they can rule out all the things that they dislike, that they can have whatever it is that they want, even if it's not real, and they want to they can satisfy all their instinct, even if they're harmful for themselves and for their people. And that leads to the destruction of human beings. Angel, we're hearing about a theory which is more or less capitalism, those large corporations that tells us what to do, because deep down all they want for us is to consume. Do you believe that there is a clear intention by those elites, or is this something that's happening naturally and it is impossible to fight it?
Yes, I can fully agree with you, Jorge. Once again, it is indeed ridiculous. We're talking about indoctrination here, pure, real indoctrination. The liberal Bolsheviks I was talking about earlier are twisting the reality all the time. They want us to accept the unacceptable. We must not allow this to happen. We see the situation now with Hungary. Viktor Orban's government is being criticized for passing a law which simply says that sexual education must be a test for parents, and the LGBTI ideology and pedophilia must not be part of the school and not part of a children's life. Another example is the so-called Matic report, voted actually in European Parliament yesterday. It is a clear, visible, pure attack on sovereign issues like family policy, I must say. I want to give you another example, this time more ideological. This week, one communist map from France displayed in a chamber during the plenary session of the European Parliament the banner of LGBTIQ, etc. ideology. The use of the flags inside the plenary chamber is forbidden by the rules of procedure of the European Parliament. Nigel Farage was interrupted when he used the British flag back in 2020, and I have been interrupted for using the Bulgarian flag. The communist map was not interrupted when she did the same. Why? It's clear why. My answer is simple. Ideology, liberal, far left liberal ideology. The liberal Bolsheviks and their ideology of the LGBTI movement, which does not tolerate any different opinion, our opinion. This is not the right of self-determination anymore. This is pure, clear Bolshevik ideology. Back to you, Jorge.
Well, in 30 seconds, the question that we consider to be the most important: have we lost the battle, or on the contrary, do our parties such as the Bulgarian national movements boast, those of us inside ECR, will be able to impose common sense to these ideological forces? I believe so. I think common sense will impose. We have hope. This is a fight between evil and good, and there are a lot of noble people with high ideals and parties like Vox, parties within the ECR that oppose gender ideology, feminism, and we will be able to stop this totalitarian ideology. So if we remain firm, if we are strong, the good, the beauty, and will prevail for sure. How about Angel? Do you think that we still have hope?
Yes, of course. I think there is a hope, and everything is on us. The only way to avoid this spiritual void is to keep hold on our traditions, our basic Christian, family, patriotic traditions, our folklore, the Christian roots of Western European culture, history and folklore of our peoples. This spiritual connection with our ancestors cannot be broken. The family consists only of a mother, father, and their children. This is an axiom for us. The communists want us to change this belief, but this is impossible. I have to say this. It's up to us, patriots, conservatives, to defend this position. This is a culture war, and this one we have to win. We are obliged to win. Back to you, Jorge.
Thank you so much, Angel. Thank you so much, Carla. We're going to be finishing with this first part of the panel, Agenda 2030, gender ideology, and then we can go into a second point within the 2030 agenda, immigration. What do Europeans think about immigration policies within the EU?
You know the policies about immigration in Europe?
No, I don't know in details, unfortunately. I'm sorry.
What do you think about the immigration policies, or in general immigrations here in the European Union?
I think it's a very difficult question. I don't know the overall European policies, but then every country adjusts to its situation.
I don't think so, and I don't think people is fully aware of things, and I think we need to have more transparency in absolutely everything so that Europe rules in a way that it is closer to the citizens, because there are many things that we do not know.
European security force is known to me. However, many of the policies of the European Union are not well known by the general public. Personally, I don't consider myself as well informed by the policies taken recently. I could say one or two, but generally I think that I like information on this topic.
I think it should be more transparent to youth what it's doing regarding migrants, especially for me at least. I'm more curious about how it's treating them when they welcome them. Are they offered good hospitality? Like, how are they actually welcomed into a country?
Transparent? No, they have an immigration program which is not known to the general public. You happen to find out about it if you see certain situations and you wonder what's going on.
C'est une institution hors sol qui ne tient pas compte des réalités.
This is a situation in which we do not know. I mean, we have to take into consideration the historical reality of Europe. There are many things that citizens do not know. I think the EU has been able to get the citizens into a liturgy state. European citizens do not know their civilization and their culture. I think it will be very positive, because otherwise there are many countries that can be left aside. And I think it is essential to fight the mafias, the organized crime that are profiting for trafficking human beings. And if we do so in a joint action, we'll be more efficient.
Come and live in your country, you should have the right to choose.
I think the European Union is entering into some competences that are not initially its own. So I do think national countries should still have some leeway to decide, even though the EU should establish some general guidelines, I think. Because I do think human dignity is also a big factor. So again, the delicate balance between human dignity and state sovereignty.
Okay, guys, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Well, we're going to finish, and we've seen this video on what citizens, many European citizens, think about illegal immigration, and what we're clear about is about the fact that they do not know about the migration policies within the EU, but it seems that they all have the idea of these being national policies. It will be the best ideas. And to talk about immigration, we have with us Rocío de Mer, National Deputy of Vox in one of the provinces of Spain that it is mostly affected by illegal immigration, and where Vox obtained some of its best results. So thank you very much, Rocío, for being with us. Good afternoon. And we also have here with us Nicola Procaccini, a colleague of ours, a Europe member of the Parliament, representing Italy, and a real expert and fighter against illegal immigration in Italy. Thank you. It's a great pleasure to be with you here. In Europe, we are living a real migratory emergency. The last episode, we have seen it in Ceuta with these 10,000 immigrants, illegal immigrants, launched by the government of Morocco against our border. The figures are shocking. Only in 2020, we got more than 41,000 illegal immigrants arriving in Spain, 30% more than in the previous year. And in the whole EU, 124,000 illegal migrants enter Europe, thousands and thousands of military-age males crossing our borders through Spain, Italy, Greece, while we were locked down. And neither in Italy nor in Spain could we go to the town nearby to take a look at our relatives, to see our relatives. On all of this, while our governments and the EU keeps on talking about green deals, gender, digitalization, this is a very straightforward question. Rocío, who's behind this phenomena? Who is financing this migration invasion? This is a very strange alliance at the end of the day. We're seeing how multimillionaires from Silicon Valley, open society, and communist parties for many countries, the entrepreneurial associations or trade unions, we are seeing a very strange alliance. And this is a phenomenon that they are all on the same side, and through Trojan horses like the fostering of multiculturalism and selling to the public that multicultural society are healthy society. This is a message that leads to the acceptance of society, and also making believe that all the people who reject this is evil, is totally evil. They're calling us racist, xenophobist, so that the Spanish person, the Italian person, or the Polish person that doesn't accept illegal migration is considered to be evil, that a migrant, that it is coming for this healthy multicultural society. And also we're seeing that is deliberate interest in achieving the instability of Europe, this southern border of Europe, accepting that the sovereign intentions of Morocco and Ceuta and Sevilla are valid, in achieving the instability of Ceuta, Melilla, and achieving this agenda that we're all victims of. Nicola, what do you think? Who's behind of this, or isn't there anyone? I believe that there is a clear ideology, which is the one that was mentioned before in the previous panel. This is the non-borders ideology that has been adopted by the orphans of communism. This type of no-borders ideology means to get rid of frontiers, geographical borders, because as it was happening last century with communism, what we try to achieve is internationalization, and nations become the enemy. However, the limits that we want to eliminate, or the borders that we want to eliminate, are not only the geographical ones, but also the biological ones. And we're talking about the social borders. We want to eliminate the concept of family, and we want to include within the concept of family everything. And the borders are the enemy that we have to fight against. And this is producing a clear drama, a very important drama, is the drama of those who believe that this ideology is a reality, whereas in reality they are the victims of this ideology. So within illegal immigrationism, there's something greater, as Rocia was saying. There's people with no scruples, but above all, there is a very harmful ideology for everyone. And this is very contradictory, because the same way we favor this massive illegal immigration, we are told as Europeans not to have more children. Having children is a burden. It's better for us to be seated eating popcorn and watching Netflix, that sons and daughters are bad for the planet, and the planet will disappear just because we're having children. Do you think there is a policy for generational replacement targeted by the elites? If that policy is not existing, there's something that's very similar to it. And we're seeing this in these last days, the 40,000 migrants that came illegally last year, the 10,000 we got all of a sudden in Ceuta, and we have a Western civilization that is entertained with all these Trojan horses, and by which we are told that we have to aim for a multicultural society, as if that was something good. And on the other hand, we have Davos economic forums with a very specific agenda financing this migration phenomena and directing it in a very specific way. At the end of the day, this place, Europe, which is the cradle of civilization, it is becoming the author of a strategy that leads a barbarian situation in the whole world. Yeah, I totally agree with what she was saying. A few days ago, there was a conference organized by the president of the European Parliament, where some of the speakers representing the left-wing parties said explicitly that since there is a demographic deficit at the European level, and since the European families are not having children anymore, we need to import migrants from Africa and from the rest of the world. And be careful, not only those who are running away from wars and prosecution, which is what they told us up until now, but also economic migrants, climate migrants. And I believe that the idea is to start replacing voters, since there are some Europeans that are not voting left-wing parties. Let's import some voters. Maybe this way we will be able to win our elections for many years in the European countries. And this conference came with a headline that was globalism or nation, which is something that we use very often when we are suffering this migration emergency. But not only us, it is suffered by those that are being targeted by the big elites, because they are being denied the right to migrate, to stay on their hometowns, and to stand up for their rights in there and to fight for their country. This is a new way of slavery, absolutely. This is another of the aspects that in a very hypercritical way are not being covered by the left-wing parties. The right not to immigrate is the right of full populations to be uprooted from their home towns, from their countries, for their beloved countries, so that they can be taken after hearing many lies to Europe, because someone needs for this to happen. And it will be easy for us to think that we have to help these people when maybe they're suffering their economic crisis, but we have to help them there where they have been born, where their parents and grandparents are. And that's real solidarity, Jorge. Very often, they take advantage of those who died on the seas to promote immigrationist ideology. And that gets me really upset, because we're talking about these people who died on the seas, and they are the result of these immigrationist policies. We have to do exactly the opposite. On the contrary, we have to support in origin those whose lives are in danger, those who are truly running away from prosecution and wars. And they're only 8%, because 92%, the other 92% are migrants that we will have to return to their own countries. So maybe we can choose this 8% at their country of origin and helping them to come here through safe and legal means of transportation, distribute them throughout the European countries, and that will be the best way of carrying out some solidarity. The worst thing is forcing people to come to Europe. We'll have to allow them not to migrate, and this is what we have to do at a global level. But in reality, sometimes they prefer other tools because their objective is a different objective. 1 minute or 1 minute and a half explaining what common sense is, protecting those who are being launched into the seas. They are the ones whose lives are in danger, and will have to guarantee the right not to migrate, to live in Africa, and to grow with their beloved ones. Rocío, what's your perspective? Are we talking about modern world slavery? Yes, to a certain extent. As Nicola was saying, we are sentencing these people to labor slavery because we are obliging them to go into their sea, and we are obliging them to be uprooted and not to fight for their own country. And on the other hand, in Europe, we are the slaves of our own cultural suicide, and we are a slave or an ideology that it is denying our own nature, is denying the nature of family, the nature of our country roots, and is denying the existence of men and women. We have a globalism that it is advancing with a big engine, but with an artificial engine that won't be able to overcome the strength and nature of the nations and of patriots.
Thank you very much, Rocío. Thank you very much, Nicola. I really hope that you enjoy a great weekend and that you have a taste of the Spanish hospitality. And now we're going to move on to another topic. We're going to watch a video by Mathali Aguilar, our colleague MP at the European Parliament and Vice Chair of the Agriculture Committee at the European Parliament, who would be talking about a type of routing, the routing of Europeans to our land, to our home, to knowing how to work on the land that they have inhabited for so many centuries. Magali? Masali? The European Green Deal intends to drive us to a more sustainable and ecological world in line with the wishes of Greta, that kid, you know her. But right now, it's actually producing a lot of paper, a lot of bureaucracy, and many hurdles for economic sectors that have shown their strategic character during the pandemic. The Green Deal is the new strategy to change agricultural model from farm to the table. And there they have a realistic goals without an impact study and forgetting often about social and economic aspects. We are facing a Europe that imposes on producers high production standards, but is looking the other way with the import of agricultural products from Morocco or Turkey, with environmental standards that are at the other end of the European standards. So we want to criticize and denounce the hypocrisy of the European Union and to foster changes through our initiatives. We want to respect the principle of preference for the community. We think that profitable agriculture is the best way to support the environment. We want innovation and science so that our farmers have safe tools to produce, and we are against cutbacks in the culture and the PAC. Cheese, ham, olive oil cannot be punished by label systems that do not respect our diversity. We are going through tremendously difficult moments. Many companies and workers have ceased their activity. There is an increasing regulation on common fisheries policies that needs further simplification, and we need to adapt to the reality of the sector. Europe needs to strike a balance between conserving biodiversity and food safety. And in order to reach these objectives from box, we think that our fisher can play a fundamental role if the European Union changes its mindset and considers them allies instead of enemies. In the discussion about the future of Europe, our nations and our peoples, we want to give voice to all those farmers and cattle raisers and foresters and cater for their concerns. Extraordinary Masali Aguilar, explaining briefly in just 3 minutes the difference between materialistic ecology and human ecology that places the human beings as the main characters in the farming sector. And now we're going to move on to our second section, which is entitled Spain Made America, but Spain also made Europe. You'd allow me, because we are in Madrid, to exercise our role as Spaniards. And the best way to start with this panel would be to connect with our friend Maria Corina Machado, who has a message for all Spaniards and Europeans who are watching us. Thank you very much to the ECR group and our friends, European MPs, Jorge Buxade and Herman Thurs, to allow me to exchange our opinions from Venezuela, talking about the future of Europe in this conference. And I'd like to say that the future of Europe also requires a very fruitful and close relationship with Latin America, of course, in commercial, cultural, innovation and knowledge areas, financial and political areas, of course, but above all in the defense of Western values, which are currently being destroyed and undermined by global operations, which include very diverse stakeholders at both sides of the pond. Today in Venezuela, we see a surge of a process of disruption, not just of democratic institutions, but also Western values. It's a very complex system that has an ideological facade that, of course, includes the Sao Paulo and the Puebla groups and all left European parties that have committed to this operation too. And behind it, there is a geopolitical support that of Russian, China, Iran, Turkey, and Cuban regimes that today have relationships, not just from the commercial or financial or intelligence standpoint, but also from the military standpoint with Maduro's regime. And of course, this is sustaining a complex criminal structure that includes terrorism, drug trafficking, going through all the different money laundering criminal networks, even child prostitution, child trafficking, etc. This is today already a danger that is moving forward in Latin America, destabilizing Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Chile. But in addition, it also has an impact on several European countries. Not wanting to see it is failing to understand the magnitude of this danger that is lurking upon all of us who share democratic values. Historically, Spain has been the channel and the main contact point between Latin America and Europe. Today, the Spanish government has turned its back on the European, the Venezuelan people. They have supported this destructive and criminal actions of Nicolás Maduro and his regime, and they have become a promoter of the destabilization promoted by this regime, and therefore they're fostering a dynamic of normalization of the horror that we are experiencing in Venezuela. And against this, there have been voices like yours raised in the European Parliament, calling things by their name, telling the truth, and actually reporting the different assaults on Nicaragua, Bolivia, Venezuela, something that other governments haven't done. Today, more than any time, we need to commit to truth, to freedom and justice. I know that this alliance that we ratified today between those who stand for this value at both sides of the Atlantic will be the foundation to build the future relationship between Latin America and Europe, which clearly knows that there will only be freedom, there will only be peace if there is justice, and if we know, identify, and face these common enemies with all force in order to bring it down together. I know that Latin America and Europe united with the different links will lead to more prosperous, wealthier and freer nations. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Maria Corina. As you recalled, we have recently held at the European Parliament the first ECR Eurolat Summit, chaired by our friend Herman Tersch. Thank you for being here with us. And we also have Mr. Humberto Calderón, former Foreign Minister of Foreign Affairs Minister of Venezuela, with a wonderful background. Thank you for being with us. Thank you, and greetings to the motherland. Well, as we mentioned in the ECR, we led this first summit, the Eurolat ECR summit, to create further links between both sides of the Atlantic and Iberoamerica. The first question is for you, Mr. Humberto. Is the European Union missed in the fight against the communist dictatorships in Venezuela, for instance? Yes, I fully agree with what my dear countrywoman and friend Maria Corina Machado just said. This is an unequal fight. Too many countries are involved in our problems. Chavez put a game on the table which is not our own, and they engaged in these policies, Russia, China, Turkey, and obviously Cuba. Today, Venezuela is not an independent country. Venezuela is a country that has been kidnapped. It has been taken over by Cubans and other countries that I just mentioned. And they are making great proceeds from the economic perspective. But what's even worse, they are making great political proceeds. What's going on in Venezuela today was a long time coming, and people didn't actually see it. And There's just a few exceptions in Europe, just a handful, your case and that of other European countries. We have felt very unassisted in terms of cooperation because those of us in Venezuela know that we're not just fighting an internal political problem, but actually a problem that has a substantial international dimension. And this compromises security not just in Latin America, but also in Europe. The Chavez and Maduro project and everything that the Sao Paulo group and the Puebla group mean actually has an importance here in Spain. And here the government is social communist, as they have stated, and they work hand in hand with all the destabilizing factors present in Latin America. And I hope that you don't go down the same journey that Venezuela has had to go through. Why is it so important that the European Union gets involved in the fight against these dictatorships? Well, it's not just important for it to get involved, it's also important for it to recognize what the quality, what the status of the regimes that we are facing. These are regimes that are totalitarian and are actually taking the continent by a landslide. So we have a European Union in which we have a high representative of the Commission for Foreign Policies, Mr. Borrell, who's actually supporting Cuba and supporting the Venezuelan regime, and at the same time they are people who attack democracies and attack people who are trying to defend themselves against brutal aggressions by the Sao Paulo Forum and the coordination of the different forces. And here I'm actually making a reference to Chile, and they have finally given way to an assembly without participation, practically. They talked about people who wanted for a new constitution. No people almost voted, and barely any people voted. The far left voted, and this has led to a constitution which is going to be dramatically biased towards incoherence and totalitarianism. And at Peru, we're seeing the same type of assault. There is a fraud there, and they're not making progress. But the European Union is in a hurry to say who the winner is when there are no winners yet. There haven't been any winners decided yet. Mr. Borrell is always running to support those who are involved in the alliance of narco-communism, those who are exploding Venezuela, exploding gold in the mining arc in Orinoco, in Delphi. And they're always on the same side. I'd like to know, those who are hearing us, to know how is it possible that Borrell is actually groping Venezuela and Cuba and China, from which no responsibilities are claimed, Iran. But just yesterday, Ursula von der Leyen was taking a shot at Hungary for a law that they're proposing. I think what's going on in the European Union is due to how nervous they are, because there is a nation that it's defending itself. It's defending its value. The fathers and the parents in Hungary have elected a government because they don't want sexual education for children underage at school, and that's what Hungarians want. And Orban's government, it's not like Sanchez's government doing the opposite of what they promised. Orban's government is doing exactly what they promised, and that's what Hungarians want. That's what the Hungarian nation wants, and that's what the Hungarian government is standing for against an interruption which is actually Soviet. What are the Germans doing there with the history that they have in Europe? Why are they trying to impose sexual education for children on Hungarians, sexual education for minors in schools? And Ms. von der Leyen, who is German and who was actually the 8th candidate that they had to chair the committee, and they have failed in all the real tasks that they had to complete vaccines, etc. The only thing that they're not failing at is expending money in limiting freedoms, and this is what they're devoting their efforts to, and this is what they're doing to people who are defending for their rights and their sovereignty, because what they're trying is to smother sovereignty, and this is what is going on with Ibero-America. Humberto, I'd like you to say specifically for young people or also for people my age, because frequently we hear in Spain and in Europe that what happened in Venezuela couldn't happen in Spain. And it is my understanding that that's what they said in Venezuela when Chavez came around. We saw that in Chile and in many countries in Ibero-America. Is it possible? Can you explain that what has happened, whether what happened in Venezuela could happen also here in Spain or elsewhere? Well, Venezuela was actually a country that received immigrants after the independence. After the Second World War, we received millions of Spaniards, millions of Italians, millions of Portuguese people, and they helped build the country. We are a mix, we are a melting pot of nationalities, and Venezuela was a reference with regards to democracy in our area. The greatest 40 years in terms of economic thriving that Venezuela has was done under democracy, but people realized that through weapons they were not going to be successful, and they participated in an electoral process, and this is exactly what's going on in Chile and what happened in other Latin American countries. And this is what happened in Colombia too. They took the occasion, they made the best of that occasion, of that window, and they participated in democracy, and they tried to blow up democracy from inside. That's what happened in Venezuela. When they said to Cubans to be careful with Chavez, we said Cuba is different from Venezuela. Venezuela is not Cuba. And about 7 or 8 years ago, in a TV show here in Spain, they said Spain is not Venezuela. When I warned them about what was going on in Spain, the attack to institutions, to political parties, to judicial powers, to all institutions, and to monarchy. Why monarchy? Why are they going after the monarchy? Well, because monarchy actually exercises power over military forces, armed forces. Armed forces are the cohesion of countries, and in Venezuela, armed forces penetrated. And no, the military actually indoctrinated the new military, and you need to be very careful because in Spain, what happened in Venezuela could happen. No one is exempt from living what happened in Venezuela because this is a project that has an international scope. And of course, in Colombia, they fortunately had the chance to win the elections. But what happened in Peru? In Peru, the whole Latin American left tried to support the candidate of the extreme left wing. And by the way, he was a man fully incapable of heading a country. What happened to Chile? Chile was the country that was progressing the most in Latin America. It was leaving the third world to become a country of the first world, and they penetrated there, and they actually put an end to Chile. They built churches, they built monuments, and they put an end to the democratic system in Chile. Actually, it's very difficult for me to have to say this because it's an honor to listen to you, but we only have 30 seconds left. So my question is, that journey started by Termentest, the summit, the ECR Eurolat, that demonstration of the patriotic forces at both sides of the Atlantic, should they call for optimism? Absolutely, but we need to work together. We need to cooperate with one another because otherwise the evil will succeed. Well, our colleague has been a president of the PEP and a Minister of Foreign Affairs, and he represents the best of that Venezuela that actually suffered the difficult attacks that Venezuela underwent. So he needs to embody that example of the fact that we need to fight the alliance that Maria Corina talked about. We need to follow that path so that we can unite forces and so that we can create synergies for resistance and for strength in order to succeed. Democracy will succeed against narco-socialism and tyranny, and that's the way forward. So thank you very much to the two of you. Thank you very much, Herman. Thank you very much, Humberto. And now we're going to move on to our third panel, globalism or land civilization or barbarics. And this is something that takes us to the roots of Europe. Will we grow stronger? Well, we're going to see this with our two next speakers, honor speakers, Mario Marichal and Santiago Pascal. But before we do that, we are going to watch a third video on attacks to Christians in Europe.
The ECR group is the voice of Eurorealism, the sensible middle way between ever more Europe and no Europe, with respect for the sovereignty of Europe's national democracies, with less bureaucracy, more fiscal responsibility, and equality for all member states. We believe the peoples of Europe want the European Union to do less and to do it better, to promote economic recovery and growth and more jobs, to help, not hinder our countries in getting immigration under control, to deliver a clean environment at a cost we can afford, to work with global partners to protect our security, to create jobs through free and fair trade. Europe should only act where it can deliver real added value to member states and their citizens. By putting Europe's national democracies back in the driving seat, we can build a Europe that will offer our countries a platform for cooperation, that will help promote European prosperity and security for generations to come.
Sin fait, nuova Europa.
La liberté est le fondement de l'Europe. Respekt für das gemeinsame Erbe. Tradition binds our continent.
Non c'è valore più importante della famiglia.
Europa jest dobrem wspólnym. Różnimy się, ale powinno nas łączyć wspólne dziedzictwo. Powróćmy do Unii Europejskiej, która z tego dziedzictwa wyrasta i która szanuje narodowe tożsamości. Only the European Union without arrogance, based on solidarity and mutual respect for its member states, can regain the support of the European nations. We can do it together.
Of course, I made a mistake and I gave the floor to a video that was not the appropriate, but still, thank you very much, Mario Marichal, for being with us here, for coming to Spain to be with us. Thank you so much for your kind invitation. Santiago Abascal, who is the chairman of BOS, thank you very much for being with us. Thank you very much and congratulations for this organization. And now it is the turn to give the floor to this video on attacks on Christians. But before streaming the video, I've been informed about a possible terrorist attack in Germany with some fatalities. Hopefully, since the video is going to be played live, we'll find out more about it and we'll let you know.
Cristianos españoles, no os olvidéis la sangre derramada de los musulmanes de la Inquisición española. Vengaremos vuestra matanza, en la que estáis haciendo ahora actual con el Estado
What you're
Islámico.
doing right now with the Islamic State? Our war with you, it's a war until the end of the world. Get out of here to the Union of Christian. We're never going to let you be at ease. That was an amazing video, images of Spain, Italy, United Kingdom, and this last image in France with the falling of Notre Dame's tower, fire destruction, barbarian civilization that wants to destroy the roots of Europe. And I have a question for you, because the truth is that the founding fathers of the EU were all Christians. And Schuman said at one point in time that well, one expression that we could repeat, democracy is either Christian or it will not be. Marion, were they Europhobes, the founding fathers of the EU? Well, first of all, let me go back to this painful image of Notre Dame in Paris. The allegory is very beautiful, because we have to know that if Notre Dame in Paris burned, it's because all the sacred things inside were saved. All the relics, all the religious statues, all the treasures there were saved. And to me, this is a signal from God. It is true that the roof of our home, our civilization, could be under flames and it could be falling, but all the things that matter can be saved. And that's how we have to read it if we are optimistic. And you're fully right. There's been a full ideological change in the middle of the EU that has gone practically unnoticed, because we've gone from a project that was built from the Christian Democrats to an entity that it is now governed and ruled by a progressist left. And of course, the relationship of this institution with Europe changes. And you were mentioning Schuman, who spoke about democracy and Christianity. And I believe that thanks to this sentence, Schuman explained that unless we defend our own civilization, we cannot defend Europe. And our civilization is also a Christian civilization. Why? This is especially interesting, and we have to analyze from the French perspective, because what's democracy? Is sovereignty and the people. Democracy can work, but for that we need to have a majority fact, and that majority fact can only be built on the basis of certain homogeneity, and it can only be built unless we have common cultural references, common values, share aims, share wishes that will allow us to create a consensus, a majority consensus, so that we can move forward together. The problem is that the EU, by favoring massive migration, by promoting the activism of Islamic and sexual minorities, contribute to the fragmentation of the people and finish with this cultural common matrix. And we see that more and more often in France, and we're seeing minority wars, wars that oblige politicians to do policies based on categories instead of trying to look for a consensus and for majority facts. And that's why the EU is threatening democracy. On the other hand, we need to know that the EU has little by little left aside their own competencies in order to gather other competencies in the cultural, educational sphere, in issues that have to do with society in a very broad sense, that are very far away from their core tasks, which were the market, the economy, and establishing rules for competition. So we find ourselves in a situation in which democracy is threatened, and we need to remember the spirit of our founder fathers, because we cannot defend democracy in Europe without defending civilization and without getting out of this European logic, which is the one of the market. what do you think about this question about founding fathers being Europhobes? I totally agree with the analysis done by Mario Marichal, and the truth is that we're in a world of contradictions. But I would like to provide a different perspective, because the question has been answered by Marion herself. I believe that the big danger that we're facing is not so much that our civilization, our democracy, the Union of Nations of Europe is being attacked from abroad, other civilizations or other cultures or different religious cosmovisions representing barbaric ideas, wanting to finish with what we are. The problem is Europe's suicide. These progressive liberal oligarchies, a globalist left-wing and a relativist left-wing party has opened the doors of Europe towards a massive immigration that is totally incompatible with the way we are, with the way we live. An immigration that it is a combatant immigration, that it is a replacement immigration, because we're talking about young male immigrants, and on the other hand, decaying Europe in a generational perspective, who wants to have no more children and who wants to import these new generations. And this is what we're facing, and puts at stake the survival of the EU, of its identity and of the Christian values, Roman law, Greek philosophy. And we don't set that from a faith perspective. Some of us have some faith, but I remember the words of the Spanish philosopher who recently passed away, Gustavo Bueno, who said in his speeches, "I'm an atheist, but a Catholic." And there are many Europeans who have no faith, but they identify themselves with the societies that we've built and are based on this Christian heritage, of this Judean Christian heritage, the Roman law and the Greek civilization. This is what we have to defend, and this is what the ruling classes dominated by left wings are giving up. When we got into Brussels, when we get there, and we've been for 2 years there, we see that these elites come with a new religion, with their new dogmas, with their own priest, and in the midst of this global crisis made up by produced by coronavirus in the middle of March, we received with honors Greta Thunberg so that she could deliver her whole show on climate change. Why is it so important for them, this green politics, this Green New Deal, and this environmental transition? I simply believe that we are seeing an ideological continuity, a neo-Marxist left party. They have mutated, and now they use as a pretext the environment in order to use it for their own sake, and to kill the growth society, and through that the capitalist evil. It is like a class clash revisited, and it is the new way that this international left wing has of using the climate to explain how, given the fact that we're facing a global problem, we have to provide a global solution that is a supranational solution, and we have to overcome our national governments to achieve this solution. The enemy is the same one. They have just mutated and they have adapted. And now we see how in this breeding ground we have a series of businesses that now are going to continue on growing, such as electric vehicles, renewable energies that are not as environmentally friendly as the people believe, but they feed this new ideology. I believe that as conservatives, we cannot reject the issue of the environment. We have to be capable of preserving preserving the environment and preserving at the same time our landscapes, our soils, our identity, because it's part of our identity battle. But we have to do so with a different rationale. This different rationale, not following the international rationale and explaining how, contrary to what left-wing people think, environmentally friendly has to go through the citizens in a very specific way, in a very local way. This is the best way of regaining our position in this combat, because the environment and the climate will let the citizens to lose their compromise, because it is something that it is very abstract and they cannot find out about their regular impact on climate change. But if we talk about fertilizers, air pollution, of being more careful with the way we consume, instead of talking about climate, we will allow these citizens to be engaged through their local communities. And I believe that the role of the Conservatives will be the one of creating an environmental rationale outside of this neo-Marxist revisited matrix, which is the one that it is ruling in Brussels, and saying that everything has to do with economic issues and business issues. We know your true interest in the preservation of the environments, but what's behind this green religion? What's behind this? How do you see it? I've always think that we cannot be patriotic unless we love the inheritance that we've received from our ancestors, and without making sure that we deliver to our next generation something that's improved. And as conservatives, we understand preservation more than anyone else, but we have to fight this climate religion. And it's hard to say some new words after what Marion has changed, but why all of a sudden the left wing is creating new religions, the one of supremacist feminism, the one that it is the LGBTI religion with their priests, their dogmas, their own inquisition. Why are they doing so? Because they've lost their relevance. The classes has disappeared, and now we're having a lot of European workers who are going through a very tough time and who have decided to vote more conservative countries, and they've left aside the left-wing parties, and they have to reconvert on what we call the cultural Marxism, and they need to compete in that terrain, and they only do so not only through the class struggle, but the gender struggle, struggling against air pollutants and aware of the environment. But we have to do some self-criticism. It is true that in our conservative positions, sometimes we are being extremely capitalist. Our capitalism is exacerbated, and that damages the environment. But what damages the environment more than anyone else are the communist regimes. They are the source of the greatest environmentalist catastrophes. But we have to reflect on the way we consume, and we have the obligation from a conservative position of providing an alternative to the narrative of the left wing, that they are only talking about us stopping producing this or that, or living the way we were living. We have to stop eating meat. We have to stop using airplanes. And why they ban us from doing things, they are not providing solution. And in the meantime, China is producing everything, so at the end of the day, we end up buying it. And Europe becomes a union not of producers, but of consumers who buy exclusively what's manufactured in China and in other countries who do not respect the labor conditions demanded in European countries and who do not respect the demands of preservation of the environment, and they're only thinking about mass production without respecting the workers or the environment. So we have the obligation of putting on the table some alternatives, and maybe this is one of the main challenges of us conservatives. You've said it, Santiago. Do not have a car, do not shower every day, do not eat meat every day, co-live, co-work, change your entire life. You'll have nothing, but you'll be happy by 2030. This is what the people at the Forum of Davos said the other day. And one of the most important traditional newspapers said that owning a house is something that it is from the past dictatorship of Franco, and that's not the future. That's the future that they want to sell to us, but we have another future for Europe. What is our future, Marion? If that's the future, it's more a highway to hell or to cemetery more than a radiant and brilliant future. What's clear is that up to now, the economic forums of Davos is in a situation of full ambiguity. On one hand, they're talking about freedoms, but we have to analyze it. And why do we have to analyze them? Because in this economic forum of Davos, there's something that it is well known, the close link that happens between the chairman of the forum and the Chinese government. We have to know that in Davos they meet in two countries, Switzerland and every summer in China. The presence of China goes back to the 1980s. Long time ago, the Chinese president, even in 2020, was received with honors versus how Trump was welcomed. He was booed, and they congratulated the Chinese government for their management of the crisis without challenging the figures that the Chinese government was giving with regards to the pandemic. In fact, they were talking about how a good job the government was doing, saying that it was the targeted measures that the government put in place, the one that allows them to fight this pandemic and end with this pandemic. And the truth is that there is some kind of a convergence between, on one hand, this international business, and on the other hand, this Chinese government, which could be summarized in a sentence, the sentence of a wonderful a professor from the U.S., which is the vigilance capitalism. So there's a very strange relationship between this China that participate at the Forum of Davos, that it is welcomed with honors and praise because they are defending globalization, versus the protectionism defended by Donald Trump at that time. And it is that globalization, that free market, which is something that's fully supported by this big data society, because they need the data. They need to digitalize society in order to feed their businesses. So there is a clear threat that it is killing freedom, and it's established by this project, not to mention the transhumanism delirium behind all of this that is presented over and over again in this forum. That's why our future is a future in which we'll have to be very careful to protect the soul of Europe, which is the defense of freedom. It's something that we've heard about very often in this pandemic, and it is important to remind the European people that we do not need to sacrifice all of our freedoms under the premise of safety or protection. So in front of this new Chinese imperialism in Europe, we have to be careful, and we have to defend our soul, and that a soul that it is threatened from outside and from inside, because the rulers use the situation to increase their level of control over the population. So I think that our future has to concentrate on these things. And of course, we have to continue on eating meat, drinking wine, and of course, we need to shower once a day, because of course, this is something basic.
It is indeed sin not to get married, don't have children, take care of the planet, don't have a family, don't have a homeland, don't have a nation. Santiago, what is our future like? What is it that we can offer? Well, I of course think that Europe cannot have a future that is opposed to our inherited heritage. We can only have a future if we use that legacy, if we are all paying homage to the generations that handed this to us with respect to the founders of the European Union. The future cannot be built on a globalistic ideology imposed, which brings us about a culture of cancellation, because all of a sudden one can be anything they wish. You can be a man, you can be a woman, but you can practically even say that you are whatever age you want to be. You can actually access the internet and see people saying, I'm a child. That's just a perception, just like sex. You can even choose your race. We have complete freedom for things that are complete madness, but we've lost our freedom. A European citizen, which is born in a democratic nation, has to challenge left-wing ideology, and immediately they need to suffer the scourge of media, the patriarchy of social media that say that you cannot raise your voice, that actually gaslight them so that they disappear, so that they don't post that often. We're actually suffering one of the greatest attacks, not just to nations, but also sovereignty and democracy. How is it possible that people who have never voted, people who own large technological companies and media, how can they tell us, Spaniards or Europeans, what we can be talking about or not? What is it that makes it possible for them to be above sovereignty and judges, depriving Europe of the greatest of freedoms? We need to denounce that contradiction and say that there will be no future for Europe if we are away from tradition, from freedom and respect of the nations that are part of the European Union. Therefore, there will be no future in a federalistic Europe, which would be a Europe devoted to mass immigration and immediate disappearance. And there's only one Europe that's possible, that can be sustainable, that can be maintained, and that can persist throughout history, built on the sturdiness of nations that have actually built Europe. Well, this is the takeaway message. We can only build a Europe on the soundness of the nations that have created Europe. Thank you very much, Marian. Thank you very much, Santiago, for your presence here. And it's been made clear the future doesn't own to globalists, but patriots, rather. And now I'm going to give it over to Rosa. Thank you very much, Rosa. Thank you very much, Jorge. Thanks to all of our speakers, Santiago, Marion. This is how we get to the end of this evening of discussion. We promised a discussion on ideas and with full freedom, discussion with no complexes. So we'd like to greet you goodbye. Thank you for your participation. And we just say see you later, because the tour is continuing and we'll meet in the Eternal City next, Rome. Thank you very much and see you soon.
There's a new hope for Europe, a Europe of jobs, prosperity, and recovery. A Europe that safeguards its citizens and borders. There's a Europe that respects its national democracies, that protects the environment and nurtures its rural economies. There's a Europe that does less and does it better, that cuts bureaucracy and adds value for you. There's a Europe that looks inwards and outwards, for trade, for security, and for friendship. It's time to get Europe under control and back on track. It's time for a new hope for Europe. It's time to reset EU.